As twilight descended upon the legendary fields of Gettysburg, Claire and Ethan, a young couple fascinated by the haunted tales of the past, ventured into the historical battleground. The air was crisp, and the last vestiges of sunlight slithered away, leaving behind a canvas of stars dotted across the vast Pennsylvania sky. They walked hand in hand, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path. The night was exceptionally quiet, a stillness that seemed unusual for an area teeming with the echoes of history's unrest. As they approached the infamous Devil's Den, a slight chill brushed against their necks, whispering secrets of the past century. Ethan paused, squeezing Claire's hand. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. At first, Claire only heard the rustle of the leaves and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. But then, slowly, faintly, the sound began to materialize. A distant thumping, like cannon fire, followed by the unsettling scream of horses and the battle cries of men long deceased. The noises grew in volume, as if the battle of 1863 was erupting around them. Terrified yet transfixed, they watched as an eerie light began to flicker between the trees. It wasn't the steady glow of a flashlight or the beam of a car headlight. It was different, flickering and wavering like the flame of a candle caught in a breeze. The light formed shapes, transforming before their eyes into a spectral formation of Confederate soldiers, marching silently through the woods. The ghostly platoon, adorned in ragged uniforms, passed across the path where Ethan and Claire stood frozen. The figures paid no heed to the couple, their eyes empty and faces devoid of expression, yet each step they took was heavy with the sorrow of the fallen. Claire could almost feel the weight of their despair and the burden of a battle that refused to leave them, even in death. Curiosity overpowered their fear, and together, they followed the spectral soldiers, who seemed to be retracing their final march. The mist thickened around them, shrouding the path and the apparitions in a ghostly fog. As they moved deeper into the woods, the sounds of battle grew louder, enveloping them in the violence of the long-ago conflict. Without warning, the apparitions halted, turning towards a clearing where the spectral images of two armies collided in silent fury. Cannon smoke billowed around the ghostly soldiers, the smell of gunpowder tinged in the cold air. Ethan reached out, as if to touch the cold mist, but Claire pulled him back. "We shouldn't interfere," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We are intruding on their ground." As they stood watching, the scene before them faded as quickly as it had appeared, the sounds dissipating into the night until all that remained was the eerie silence of the battleground. The spectral soldiers vanished, leaving Claire and Ethan alone under the canopy of trees. Each breath they took a stark reminder of the life within them, so starkly contrasted by the death they had witnessed. They walked back to the car in silence, each step away from the battleground feeling like a step back into reality. A reality where the echoes of the past were confined to history books and whispered legends. Yet, here they had crossed into a realm where those echoes still lived and breathed. Haunted by what they had seen, Claire and Ethan promised to keep their spectral encounter a secret, a private link between them and the spirits of Gettysburg. But as they drove away, one thing became clear. History was more alive than they had ever imagined, and on some nights, it reclaimed its voice with terrifying clarity. Night had enshrouded the historic fields of Gettysburg as I, Tim, led my small yet seasoned group of paranormal investigators across the hallowed grounds. History books detail the clash of the Great Battle, but tonight, we sought a different kind of encounter, the kind that utilizes not cannons, but EVP recorders and infrared cameras. For decades, I'd pursued the spectral and the eerie, hoping to uncover what lurks in the shadows. My team comprised Lena, who wielded tech like a wizard; Marcus, the skeptic whose role was to challenge our interpretations; and Elsie, whose sensitivity to the unseen often guided our explorations. "Equipment check," I murmured as we treaded the rocky path to Devil's Denver. Despite Marcus' usual grumblings about ghost stories, even he couldn't deny the electric charge in the air, one that made the hairs on your arm dance. All our meters were on, but nothing spiked. Yet, Lena, always alert, whispered, "Do you feel that? It's like a watchful silence." She was right. It felt as though the night itself held its breath. We positioned ourselves around a cluster of boulders, renowned for sightings and strange photo anomalies. Elsie began to softly speak, inviting any spirits who might linger to communicate. Minutes ticked by, filled only by the occasional crackle from our walkie-talkies. Then, without warning, a chill swept through the air, severe enough to see our breaths. This was it, the sudden drop in temperature we often experience during a manifestation. Our equipment sprang to life. Lights blinked as if responding to Elsie's invitation. "This is Tim," I said into the thick air. "We mean no harm. We are here to listen, to communicate." A static-filled whisper echoed through our headsets, a disembodied voice mingling with the breeze left behind. Every light from our gadgets flared as if in panic, a sudden wind churning dust and leaves around us. Elsie's eyes widened as she pointed toward a shadowed figure a few yards away from Marcus. Not a trick of light, the figure stood, discernible, human-shaped, but entirely composed of what seemed like a swirling dark mist. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice betraying a flicker of belief. It responded, its voice a distorted mimicry of human speech, reverberating through our devices. "A wait." Elsie took a step forward. A historian in our midst, she seemed to derive a word from her vast knowledge of the place's history. "Are you waiting for someone? Are you a soldier?" But then, the shock hit. The figure, slowly becoming more visible, more detailed, took a familiar form. I felt a strange twist in my gut as I stared at the apparition. It bore a striking resemblance, not to any Civil War soldier, but unervingly to myself. Marcus murmured what we all withheld in our thoughts. "Tim? How?" The specter didn't answer directly. Instead, it started to fade as it reached out a misty hand towards me, halting mere inches from my face. "Unfinished," it whispered before dissipating into a cold gust, leaving behind nothing but a haunting echo and the lingering question of why it mirrored my image. Our equipment gradually settled, the lights dimming back to normal as the air warmed slightly. "Was that?" Lena couldn't finish her sentence. I stood frozen, my mind racing. The ghost of Gettysburg resembling me was no random trick of paranormal activity. Was this a warning, a reflection of my fate, or a deeper connection to this ground I had yet to uncover? "We need to investigate this," I declared, determined more than ever to return. What had just happened turned our hunt for ghosts into a personal quest, my own past or future seemingly intertwined with the spirits of this storied battlefield. As we packed up our gear, the night seemed to observe us with an unknown intent, and the fields of Gettysburg whispered, leaving us with more questions than before we arrived. As night descended upon the hallowed grounds of Gettysburg, a group of Civil War reenactors pitched their tents along the same ridges where Union and Confederate forces once clashed in one of the bloodiest battles of the war. The group, animated with excitement and reverence for the history they were about to reenact, settled around a crackling campfire under a crescent moon. Mark, the leader of the group and a fervent historian, began recounting eerie legends of Gettysburg, tales of ghostly apparitions and unexplained sounds that supposedly haunted these fields. The group listened, enraptured and uneasy, as the darkness deepened and a thick mist began to curl around their campsite. As the night wore on, the air grew inexplicably cold, and the whisper of the wind seemed to carry voices. Faint at first, the sounds grew into discernible cries and the thundering of hooves. The reenactors glanced nervously at each other, their skepticism waning as the sounds intensified, mimicking the chaotic tumult of a battle. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the mist. He was clad in a tattered Union uniform, his face gaunt and eyes hollow with a profound sorrow. He walked with a limp, dragging his right leg as if wounded. The group froze, staring in disbelief as the figure stopped before them and spoke in a hollow voice. "Why do you mimic the agony of others who have fallen on this sacred ground?" Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble and the air filled with the ear-splitting sound of cannon fire. The reenactors flinched, covering their ears, as spectral soldiers appeared from the mist, engaging in a violent clash around the camp. The group was caught in the middle of an ethereal reenactment of the battle, witnessing the horrors of war firsthand, a far cry from the controlled reenactments they were accustomed to. Paralyzed with fear, the reenactors watched as the ghostly figures fought fiercely, oblivious to the living intruders in their midst. Mark finally regained his composure and addressed the wounded soldier. "We are here in remembrance, not mockery. Tell us how to honor your memory." The spectral soldier paused, turning to Mark, his eyes piercing. "Understand the gravity of this ground," he replied solemnly. "Carry forth the stories with truth and reverence, not as a spectacle." As suddenly as they had appeared, the ghostly battle faded, and the soldiers vanished, leaving behind a haunting silence. The traumatizing sounds and sights of ghostly warfare etched into their minds. The group was left to reflect in the eerie calm. Shaken to their cores, the reenactors spent the remainder of the night in solemn silence, the thrill of historical reenactment forever changed in their hearts. By morning, the group, now deeply moved by the ordeal, vowed to approach their role with a newfound respect and commitment to authenticity and remembrance. Their encounters with the supernatural forces of Gettysburg cemented a profound understanding that the ground they walked was not just a stage, but a resting place for souls who had suffered greatly. Their reenactments continued, but now, carried out with a somber tone and a dedication to educating others about the true horrors and cost of war. The ghost of the wounded soldier never appeared again, but his message, and the experience of that terrifying night, lingered in the minds of all who were present, forever changing the way they interacted with history.